everybody, my name is Geraldine O'Reilly and I work at Clio as a Community and Events Manager. I'm delighted to be bringing you today's event. So this is the fifth in our year-long Making of a Law Firm series. Starting a law firm is tough and building your firm is even tougher. And so we decided to bring you this series and support the community via this online monthly event series that will run throughout 2020 and follow 4 law firm leaders who are all on the road to building new successful UK law firms. Today, we will be tackling a big subject or subjects, courage and confidence. We will discuss tools and techniques to overcome fear and find the courage to lead decisively and authentically. Today, and throughout the year, it would be really appreciated if you could share your support for the series and for our leaders on social media using the hashtag Making a Law Firm. Our leaders are all kindly taking time out of running and setting up very successful, busy startups. They're taking the time out to share their experiences with the community. So they deserve a thank you here and there along the way. So today we have 2 of our 4 leaders rejoining us for this subject. First up, Natalie Foster, founder in Foster Clay Law. So Natalie co-founded Foster Clay in 2020 with the vision to have a friendly, forward-thinking law firm that provides excellent professional service to individuals and businesses, both locally and nationally. Natalie saw a gap in the market for a firm offering digital legal services. Next, we have Kim Cross, partner at Vine Law. So Kim is a solicitor who initially qualified in Australia and moved to the UK in 2009. Along with co-founders Melinda Smith and Kath Collins, Kim started Vine Law in 2020 with the mission to build a firm that focuses on providing exceptional client service and is a great place to work. And our guest for today is Tanya Cuturi, founder and ACC executive coach. Tanya worked in credit hedge fund sales for JP Morgan and Barclays Capital for almost 9 years before moving to property management. A mother of 3, Tanya retrained as a barefoot executive coach and is an accredited ACC coach from the International Coach Federation. Tanya opened her own business to support entrepreneurs and professionals facing the challenges of working in corporate environments. So thank you very much for joining us, Tanya.
Thank you for your invitation and your introduction.
You're welcome. So before we get into it today, I do want to cover off on a couple of things. So today's session will be 60 minutes, so planning to finish up around 12 noon, so everyone can get out and have their lunch. We want lots of Q&A, and it's important that when you do put in some questions in the chat, to call out maybe who it's for. So if it's Tanya, Kim or Natalie that you're hoping would answer the question, let us know. Or if it's open-ended, that's good to know too. We will be recording and we are recording right now, and we will be sending the recording out in the next 24 hours. If you do have questions, please use the chat function and use the drop-down panelists and attendees, and that will actually share your conversation or your chat or your question with fellow attendees so that they can also see it as well, so other people on the line. Or you can use the Q&A if you just wanted to get it to our panelists. So as mentioned before, I work at Clio, and Clio is on a mission to transform the legal experience for all. And being the market leader for legal technology means that we have an added responsibility to set the tone for the next generation and to help ensure that the technology shaping legal experiences is also serving a greater good. I wanted to recognise that this series is part of that overall mission. Back to the topic of discussion for this morning. So starting your firm can be one of the most freeing and rewarding things you will ever do. But that doesn't mean it's always easy. In times of uncertainty or change, how do people find confidence in leadership and choose courage? Well, we've brought in an expert to help us understand this, sharing tools and techniques, and our leaders, Kim and Natalie, are also going to delve into their journeys in developing courage and tackling fears, both in the past and in the present, specifically when it comes to their new businesses. So at this point, Tanya, I'm going to pass over to you to take us through our next part of the session.
Thank you, Geraldine, for being such an amazing host. Thank you again for the invitation. So as you mentioned, I'm Tanya. I'm a coach. I'm a courage and confidence coach. I have a particular interest in those topics as courage and confidence are intertwined in a way that it's courage and fears go hand in hand in some way. It's not the absence of fear that creates that make us courageous and brave. It's actually doing the right thing even in the presence of fear. So where do we start? We all seek more confidence. We all seek more courage. Where we are now, right now, is a good starting point, actually. We have two fantastic leaders who are willing to be vulnerable and share their stories. Before we dive into the conversation, I thought that for everyone to feel that they're part of the conversation, we should create a poll with some specific questions around courage, confidence, and vulnerability. So Geraldine has very kindly organized that for us. We've got a few questions here, so there's only 4 of them. And the first question is, finish the sentence. Courage is, number 1, something we're born with, a personality trait. I invite you to answer those questions as they will kind of give the tone of how we're going to start the session. So courage is something we can learn, or something, or not having any fears. So I gave a little bit of hint at the beginning of the presentation. Number 2, finish the other sentence is, being vulnerable is not something I can show in my business as a leader. Number 2, sharing everything about myself. Being vulnerable is putting myself out there without the fear of consequences. Am I going to see the results at the end, or can I see them already?
So I think we need to finish the poll and then I'll be able to share the results. All
right, so I'll read the questions and then you can share the results. When it comes to confidence, I struggle the most with being a confident leader, managing my time well, making mistakes, receiving criticism or other. And the final question is, a good leader is someone who's not afraid to be vulnerable, someone who focuses on their strengths and the strengths of the team rather than their weaknesses, someone who surrounds themselves with a diverse team, and all of the above. I'd love to see the answers if it's possible.
Yeah, so we're just at 62% voted. I might just let it get to 70 if we can.
Yes.
And then we'll close it out.
Yes, so just to go through the questions here. Very often we imagine that we are born in some way, you know, we're born worthwhile, right? It's our birthright to be worthy, to the same way as today, for instance. I want this presentation to go well. I want this conversation to go well. But if it doesn't go well, I am still going to be okay at the end of the day. I'm born, I wake up in the morning okay, and I go to bed okay. Whatever happens in the middle is not going to define me as a human. And there's a very important distinction here between this birthright of worthy, a feeling that we are a worthy person, and esteem. And very often we mix the two, and we kind of cultivate this sense of achievement and self-esteem, especially when we work in a very fast-paced environment, adrenaline environment, where results are what we believe define us. So that's why I think the definition of courage is something to spend some time on. And I want to ask you, ladies, you know, you've started a law firm during a pandemic. What was the hardest part for you to start and embark on the journey?
Shall I go? The hardest part, I think it was fairly easy to talk about it. It was exciting, the planning stage of it, and thinking, oh, you know, this is something that we can really do. And you just get into this this situation where you're planning something and talking about it and getting excited. The difficult part is where you got to make that leap. The leap is tough. But I can tell you from being on the other side of it that it's worth it. And I think what you're saying about that it's not about not having fear. So I think a lot of the time people think, oh, I'm having this negative emotion, I'm having this negative reaction, I'm afraid, I feel sick, I feel worried, and therefore that means it's not the right thing, so I won't do it. But I would just say that a good thing is to learn to challenge what's going on in your body and those feelings that you have, because it's not often very reliable. Yes, you're worried, yes, you're scared, but that doesn't mean that your body is telling you not to do it. What it means is that you're just afraid, you're just worried. It doesn't mean that it's not the right thing. And as soon as you do it, and as soon as you do that thing that you find difficult, you realize, actually, I can do this. And just having done it, the amount of confidence that in itself brings to you is phenomenal. The fact that you have been afraid of doing something, but you've decided to do it anyway because you've thought it through, it just makes you feel so confident and so proud of yourself as a person, I think.
Do you want to add something to that, Natalie?
No, I agree most definitely with all of what Kim's just said. I think for me, it was initially such a big animal to look at planning, launching a firm, that the only way to deal with it was to compartmentalise and deal with one objective at a time. To look at the whole thing would have been quite overwhelming. In the past, I have personally suffered with overwhelm quite a lot, and at times, even in my late teens, some panic attacks, which was my body's reaction to not being able to process and deal with what was in front of me. It was far too much to comprehend, and these weren't even on a scale of what I deal with now. But I think that's just part of your maturity and your journey as an individual, and confidence is key, but genuine confidence is not the same thing as appearing to be confident, and that's quite a quiet emotion, it's a quiet characteristic. Confidence is very internal, it's not external, but it's quite often confused with, oh, she looks really confident, I've always been called bubbly or really easy to get on with, you know, and that's got nothing to do with how you feel inside. But yeah, I think going back to what Kim says, to overcome your physical reactions to fear, and there are great things on the other side of that.
Thanks, Natalie and Kim, for sharing that. I mean, when you do something for the first time, your brain doesn't like it. Your brain wants to escape, wants to stay in bed, wants to run away. You know, it's like the hand brain that we've been taught. So if that's your brain, you know, if you're in front of a danger, or if you're in front of something that you're doing for the first time, or let's say someone asks you a question, you have no idea what the answer is. That's what your brain does. Your amygdalia is completely exposed. That's the limbic region of the brain. It's the part where all your emotions are stored. And the prefrontal cortex, which is that part, which is the computer of the brain, is completely disconnected. So you're in that position. And what happens when you're in that position? The emotion starts to kick in. And the way you talk to yourself is in that moment is very fundamental and key, right? Because you start to awfulize, you start to be your worst best friend. There's a famous psychologist who used to say, if you go to a restaurant and you actually have two people talking, and let's say it's your brain and it's yourself talking, people would call the police, because the way we talk to ourselves it's not a friendly way we talk to ourselves. So there are ways, and there's a technique here that I want to focus on and let you know about how you actually can regain control and move back to that stage. And it takes practice, but it's also kind of recognizing, instead of saying, no, I have to be confident right now, you have to start by acknowledging the emotions. And there's different ways of doing that. One way is going for a walk. And that's someone called Sam Karashi, who's a psychiatrist. He's saying if you go for a walk, especially in the early time of the day, and you think of a challenge without any distractions or anything, and you go for a long walk or like a 5-minute walk, any time, and you think of that challenge, you're actually creating the pattern in your brain to find solutions. So you're actually creating that, I think it's called the retinal flow. And that's something that that encourages more confidence in your day. So that's a simple thing to do. So disconnect yourself from whatever gives you the fright, whatever makes you feel uncomfortable when you're doing something for the first time that we were talking about. And then another example is when we were talking about being in a restaurant and listening to your brain and yourself talking to each other, and the police being called, is actually breaking down. So instead of when you hear yourself talking in a negative way, ask yourself a question. So if it's, oh, I have this presentation today, I have no idea how good I'm going to be, or oh, I'm meeting this client and actually I feel that I'm not good enough. I have this, we spoke about in our other session about imposter syndrome, and Natalie, I'm going to let you speak in a bit about what you want to add to it. And it's actually saying, so how have I overcome a situation like this in the past? How have I overcome a presentation like that in the past? Oh, I know, I remember I listened or I read about this author, and that really helped me. Okay, so let's find a solution. And it's kind of moving from victimhood into survivor, into victor. How do you transition from a phase of victim of amygdalia hijack into reconnecting your brain and your emotions and making decisions? Natalie.
Can you hear me okay? I understand there was a bit of an issue with my sound. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of like overcoming these things, it sounds strange, but speaking to myself internally, I have an internal monologue that seems to be logical with me when I feel that things are getting too much. In the past, obviously, there are various different things that you can use to overcome anxiety. I never needed any medication or anything. It was just a journey that I had to go through, I think, as a young adult, arguably even in my kind of late 20s. But something that was really fundamental for me was taking myself out of a situation and talking myself through it and being very logical. And it's almost like an authoritarian voice, and I still have it now. If I come against, particularly aggressive solicitor on the other side, if I've got a member of staff that perhaps behaviour might be a bit challenging, I always try to look at the other person's objectives, that them being like that is not about me. It's nothing to do with who I am or whether they like or respect me. There's something going on with them that I may or may not be aware of that's causing that behaviour. And I think it's quite arrogant for somebody, me included, to think that you know enough to make a judgment on that individual who's giving off that behaviour. So quite often circumstances and situations can be arisen from individuals being unreasonable, not helping you out or not being amicable with various different things, being a job's worth, all those sorts of different types of terminologies that we use. But I do find that if you try to empathise with the other side and remove the conflict, so if somebody's trying to bang their head against a wall, if you remove the wall, they've got nothing to bang their head against, and just go, look, clearly you're having a difficult time. How can we move forward? How can I make this better? And straight away, you're just removing the conflict, and that allows them to then say, do you know what? da 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 da, and those sorts of really stressful conversations can be removed by just holding back on your aggression, not doing the fight thing straight away, but just flipping it on its head. I've had to learn personally that the fight reaction, I need to keep reins on that. And it's second nature to me now, but for a long time, my knee-jerk reaction to anything, even if it wasn't my battle, even if it was a loved one's battle, or even somebody I vaguely thought was all right, I would see it as my position to fight their cause, defend, and it was actually my personal things from completely unrelated events, venting what was stored up. And because those things have been dealt with and processed, I just don't feel the need for that level of antagonistic behaviour anymore. So again, why is something overwhelming? If have your internal voice ask the question, why is this stressful and how can I diffuse this? And the true strength for me comes in diffusing and moving forward with something rather than pummeling someone into the ground, which is often an impression of people in this industry, and it couldn't be further from the truth, really.
I think for me, it's all about compassion. So compassion for yourself and compassion for other people. So if you're in that situation where you are facing something difficult and your internal monologue is screaming at you, one of the things that I was taught to do, which I think is really helpful, is to understand that that inner voice is trying to protect you. That is your subconscious. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to help you. And one of the ways actually that you can diffuse it is to say, thank you very much. I understand what you're trying to do. It's not really helping because you're making me feel a bit worse because you're bagging me out. So thanks for your help. Let's try and go at this a different way. And I find that talking to that subconscious voice in your head actually can calm it down a bit. Yeah.
Those are fantastic examples. And what you were saying also earlier, Natalie, about how to deal with difficult clients and difficult situations as well. You've touched upon that concept of Stephen Covey that he says in his book, the highly, if I say correctly, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, is focused on being interested rather than interesting. And so you kind of spend time in trying to be curious and understanding and having a more scientific way of dealing, with issues and actually asking for more and understanding more. And I think coaching is very much inspired by kind of that concept of trying to truly dig deeper on the person and understand what they're actually trying to say. And to talk about a bit of this anxiety, this social anxiety that we may have when we are in meetings or we're doing presentations, etc. We want to be interesting. When someone we feel we have this term imposter syndrome, right, in psychology. And it's actually, imposter syndrome is actually a sign of intelligence, because when you have doubt, it's a sign of intelligence. I think is a scientist who said that. I think his name is Russell Vincent or something like that, if I remember properly. But it's a sign of intelligence when you have doubt. So all of us who have imposter syndrome, we're intelligent. Let's just say that in some way. But yes, a way of overcoming this is you don't need to be interesting. You have to be interested, and that's how you actually create connections and authentic connections. And that's exactly what we were talking about, Natalie. And like you said, Kim, also about taking ownership and say thank you. I see the emotion, I see them, but do you remain in the emotional state? No, you want to come out of it, and you take ownership of those emotions, and there's different ways of doing that, like asking yourself questions or moving on the ladder of trying and finding solutions. But I find that asking yourself questions, or as you would, like you said, being compassionate towards yourself, being your own best friend, and asking yourself the question that you would ask a friend who's going through the same thing. So there was something else about vulnerability that came out, and vulnerability is often linked to weakness, right? And we think that if we're vulnerable, we're someone who's showing weakness. But actually, I don't think that there is any example in leadership that we do, especially, you know, when you do something for the first time, like creating a law firm for the first time, and you put yourself out there, etc. There's not an example of courage that doesn't involve vulnerability, and that's a concept that Brené Brown really talks about in detail, and there is not a single example in life of leadership that doesn't involve vulnerability. So to the question, Paul, I think it was 83%. Everybody answered that it's not fearing the consequences that is true act of courage, and it's vulnerability. It's showing true authenticity. Showing authenticity is actually slowing down and being in the present moment, and showing where we think we can improve. Have you encountered moments of where you felt a bit disconnected, not fully accepted, or not fully 100%, a bit of an imposter in your roles yourselves?
I think I possibly can answer this if I may. I certainly have. My journey into the industry was completely and utterly quite ridiculous, actually. It was not the traditional route into a legal setting. So I worked, like you, for Barclays Bank, and went to Canary Wharf and did the whole training around financial services and marketing and brand, and had some fantastic training, but it was a very commercial lens that I was trained through, which at the time was quite different to that of a high street law firm. I worked in Barclays Bank for a number of years, which was great because you're incubated. You wear a uniform, you follow a set of guidelines. There's a procedure and a policy for everything. You're not dependent on you, because you can always hide behind your navy blue uniform and say, well, this is what I'm told to do. This is what my manager said. The thing is with people like Kim and I is that we set the standard now. There's no one to hide behind. So we have to own every single decision of that, both on the staff and us. But yeah, to answer your question, coming from that setting and then studying after I'd had my children and going in to the legal industry, which will now be about 6 years ago, only 6 years ago, I'm still in my period of qualifying to become a solicitor. So I've done my law degree, but I'm actually going to complete the SQE, have to do a number of SILEX as well. So my journey for the route to qualification isn't over. I have no qualms in saying that. I think, obviously we've got numerous people that are online now, but as a manager or as a partner in a law firm, there are people who I have encountered when I embarked on being in law firm management that could not believe that I'd had, the sheer audacity to have, thought themselves a manager of a law firm. But the reality of it is that law firms are a business, and they are there to make money through delivering excellent professional services, but they have to be in a decent financial state, otherwise clients are at risk. So it benefited everybody to bring those attributes that I'd learned in a prior setting to a law firm setting, and having studied the material, we've merged the two. So I had encountered, and still not so much now, but do encounter people who perhaps don't wish to email me directly about things, even though I'm a partner of the firm. They would prefer to speak to somebody who's 30, 40 years PQE. The irony being that those individuals, some of which may not be able to compose an email. They'll have to dictate it and get somebody who's 25 years younger than them to generate the email and send it out, because their skill set doesn't lie in IT and digital services. So I think for me, it was coming to terms with my insecurities, knowing that, yes, people will think, wow, that's been a journey, that's been quite a rapid route to partnership. But there's a reason that I was asked asked to do that. There was a reason that I was invited in to running the business that I was in previously, and there's a reason why my business partner wanted to come into business with me. There's a reason why staff I worked with previously jumped ship to come and work at my firm. So it's remembering to give yourself due credit, not excessive credit, because I think that can be dangerous, but due credit when, you know, other people's reactions to you starting something is positive. Take that. So yeah, it's been about being able to pat myself on the back. I don't tend to give myself a great lot of credit because I don't feel the need to. I think it should be, you know, you can see results wise when the firm is doing well, because it's not so much about a personal success, but my success will really very much is attached to the performance of the firm, happiness of the staff, which after 10 months is easier to measure. For the first 3 or 4 months we couldn't measure anything, we were all over, but we're in a much more measured place now. So yeah, that's how I kind of measure and come out of that imposter syndrome and go, well, actually look at the evidence, you know, we are doing okay.
What a great example. Showing focusing on the positive feedback and carrying on doing what you know is the right thing is a true sense of courage. So despite the fears, the fear of being criticized or failing, etc., the fact that we know and we truly passionately know that we are doing the right thing because it makes sense to us. And that's where in coaching, we spend a lot of time understanding our core values and why we're doing what we're doing before setting any goals in life. But some important values come out there. It can be a sense, the community sense of things. It can be creating inclusion in others. It can be family. It can be many different things. And when you understand your core values, it's easier to make decisions. And very often I find that most people will be asking me, so what is the right decision for me? What should I actually do? Should I leave the company? Should I actually do something else? Or should I stay in my role when they're unhappy where they are? And very often the answer isn't that simple. There's not one right answer. But when you having, and the gut feeling is very important, but when you understand your core values and what you do, the meaning of what you're doing, it's easier to keep going, to take that first step and then carrying on. And the way you've portrayed it is very significant of that. You know that despite the potential criticism or the fears that you may have, you know that it's the right thing. So you keep going. And I don't know if that's something that resonates with you, Kim, as well. The idea of, you know, what truly matters to you right now and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think once you start, then you have a responsibility to yourself and your family and your partners to go forward. And so it can be very overwhelming. You know, you can feel incredibly vulnerable all the time. And the thing in the early days, especially, the technique that we tended to use was just to do one thing at a time. You know, and every day that we get through it, every day that we walk through the door, and every day that we you know, are working in this firm, is another day that we've succeeded, and it's another day that we've felt vulnerable, but we've mastered it. So I think it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? And I think I can see a lot of people talking about imposter syndrome, and I think particularly as women, you know, that's there a lot. You know, at the previous firm that I worked for, we were having a lot of trouble with it a couple of years ago because, you know, we had changes in the SRA guidance and all those things, and this idea that you can't get things wrong, or that there's such serious consequences if you do this wrong with that wrong, and it just starts to just be overwhelming. And that in itself makes you feel very vulnerable, because you think, if I make this mistake, or if I get that wrong, then then the whole world feels like it's going to crumble. And I think that comes back to compassion, and back to understanding that none of us are perfect, none of us. And even at the firm that you're at, perhaps the leaders that you're with don't show their vulnerability, or they don't really talk about things very much. Things are probably a little bit different for me, because I think there's a cultural difference as well, because Australians do tend to wear their hearts on their sleeve a bit more. So we do tend to probably be a bit more sharey, probably oversharey. But I think just going through the motions and just going through everything and working through it, you do tend to master it, and again, that gives you confidence as you go through it. I've lost
Yes. Yes, and as we know, being vulnerable is not like you're saying, it's not about sharing everything, but it's about knowing what you can share, when you can share it, and not fearing the consequences, but knowing that there might be consequences, because when you put yourself out there is always a risk of being criticized and failing, but you're not responsible for the emotions of others. You're already out there. You just do your job. You do the right thing in line with your values, but you can't be responsible, right, for the emotions of others.
No, and I think it's rare as well that you'll actually share a vulnerability, or share something that you're not confident with, and that the reaction that you get is, oh, what are you talking about? I think that most of the time everyone else is feeling exactly the same, they're just not talking about it. So the fact, like, if you're the first person that says it, mums are a lot like this. When you have a child and you think, like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and the baby's keeping me up all night, and I just want to a funny mum story is, I just want to have a minor accident so that I can go to hospital, so that I can have a holiday. Like, everyone thinks it, but nobody talks about it. So just sharing those things, and sharing the things that you're unsure about, it's important, I think, and it's a way that we can support each other as human beings, and also as professionals. And I think it's a really important part of leadership as well, because there is nothing worse, I think, than having a leader who seems to know everything, or who will not admit when they don't know something. So they'll pass work to you and say, oh, can you go and do this for me? And you say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, well, you work it out. And half the time they don't know either, but they don't say so. Whereas actually, if you just accepted that, we have to go through this together, so I never do that. If I don't know something, then I will say so, and we work together to do that. And I think that part of your role as a leader is education. And this might come from, the fact that my mum was a teacher, so I grew up with loving to learn. But it's part of your role, I think, as a leader, to not only teach people what the answers are to everything, but to teach them how to find the answer, to teach them how to deal with lack of confidence, to teach them how to deal with anxiety and panic. The fact that you can help those people through their professional life, to me, is really important.
Thank you.
Tanya, Natalie, apologies for cutting in. Just lots of kind of comments and situations and anecdotes in our chat. There was one question here for Kim, going back to something that you did say there around dealing with imposter syndrome, and there was a question on, is your approach to just do it and live the experience, and that then overwrites the feeling in the end because you get through it?
So no, there's actually, if anyone is struggling with anxiety, there's a really good app that I use that has a lot of I don't know what you call them, like audios that you can listen to that are really helpful. And one of the ways that you can deal with anxiety and fear is to get comfortable sitting with that fear, to get comfortable with that feeling, and to say, yes, I'm afraid, but I'll just try and sit here with this fear and then see what happens. And if you can get to that point where you can practice, it's a skill, so you practice that, And every time you'll find that the fear gets less and less and less. And every time you overcome that fear and you do the thing that you wanted to do before that fear reared its ugly head and made you feel terrible, every time, then you are less impacted on that, like less impacted by that. And so the app I was talking about, it's called Dare. So you should have a look at that. But they've got some really good audios that will teach you how to sit with that fear and how to just kind of reduce those emotions and sort of carry on anyway. That's not to say that if you're having a really extreme reaction to something that you should just plow on, because there are some times when actually that thing is not for you. You know, there are times when you should, when it's just too much and you can't do it, and that's okay. You know, and if you forgive yourself for that, then that's also something that's compassionate to yourself. You don't have to go and do everything, but just be wary, I would say, of giving up at the first sign of sickness in your tummy. You know, because there's a difference between something that is clearly wrong and something that is just uncomfortable, even quite a lot uncomfortable. But where that line is tough. You have to work it out for yourself. Yeah.
Don't you think, Kim, that anxiety, you know, we talk about this term anxiety, but you just said it, sickness in your tummy. I'm sure I recognise all of those symptoms, but it's useful. Like adrenaline is useful. It's there for a reason. So when you've got a job list as long as your arm and you're on a deadline and you've stupidly faced 3 clients, you'll get back to them by 5 o'clock, and you know full well it's probably above what you should have said you could do.
Yeah.
You've got this surge of adrenaline, which can be interpreted as worry or anxiety, but actually it's your body's way of saying, right, turbo, rocket fuel, get your job list done. Just it's making sure that you don't go into absolute overwhelm and going, right, I've got the energy, I've got the push, I need to prioritize, bang, 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 bang. And I've always said, I joke with my staff about my position, certainly not about any other person's situation, but I'm quite open that I suffer with anxiety. And I'll kind of joke and they'll say, do you want another coffee? It's like, I don't think so. I think I might jump through the roof, or, you know, and I'm very open about it, about the impact it can have on my behaviour, but not really in a negative way. Like, I will openly say, yes, I do suffer with anxiety, but it's really useful. It gets things done. Because it does. Because some of the best work I've ever done has been at 4 o'clock in the morning, where I've woken up, can't get back off to sleep, mind starts going, do you know what? Just get downstairs and bash out the work while it's present and there. You know, it's not ideal and it's not conducive to everyone's lifestyle, but, you know, certainly when I was studying and I had 2 small children, my husband was commuting, it was loads of fun. There was so many very important responsibilities in my life that my studies would come about 3rd or 4th, but it was so important to complete that and get to the next chapter. If I had a deadline with an assignment, you know, that there's, like any student, but certainly a mature student with that has parenting responsibilities, anxiety was so useful. It would lead to an eventual burnout, of course, but if I saw light at the end of the tunnel, knowing, right, there's a bottle of wine in the fridge and there's a sofa at the end of this, then I would allow myself the reward of completely giving in. But up until that point, you know, what sets people like us apart from people that aren't achieving what we are, apart from the desire, of course, is that we do push that extra mile. We do more than what generically, you know, people may do. We do a bit more, we ask a further question, we do some further research, and it's all fueled by, certainly in my circumstance, anxiety, drive. I think they're all interlinked.
Yeah, look, what you're saying, we both said just now is that I would add 2 things to it. So stress is not all negative. Like you said, we need stress to, if we didn't have any stress, if everything was exactly the same every single day, we would be bored, right? The question is, how much stress do you need? And all of us need a different amount of stress. And in psychology, there's this term, eustress, called positive stress. So it's a bit like a graph like this, right? And there's a certain amount of peak performance and linked to the stress level. So you have your performance here and your stress there. And there's a certain amount of stress that each of us need to be peak performers. But when you go above that amount of stress, you go into distress. And that's where stress is negative. And that's where anxiety takes over. That's where you have the amygdalia in hijack, where it's very hard to make decisions. It's very hard to move forward, etc. And what you want is recognize, like you're saying, Kim, when you're getting there, before the amygdalia hijack, before you're in distress. And that's, the app that you were talking about is a great way to recognize it. It's a great way to say, I've got something in my stomach. That's okay. I need that. That's actually going to help me perform, be good at that presentation. It's exciting, but it's when it's actually taking over the stage. And there's something that, the cast of characters, right? We're not just anxious, happy, sad, confident, not confident. We know what confidence is, but we also know what not being confident is as well. Our mind is a bit like a stage, right? So right now, who is at the center of the stage? Who have we invited? And it's knowing that we have a choice of who we want to invite or who we want to have less of. So if anxiety of misses or missed anxiety is at the center of the stage, how can we make sure that he or she takes a step back? And that's something you can work on by doing mindfulness, by going for a walk, by doing anything. Some people go and look at themselves in front of the mirror and smile, because it's just that disconnection of, that moment of anxiety, how you disconnect. But you need to create this disconnection between yourself and your thoughts to be able to take over and take ownership of these things. So I think one of the elements in creating internal confidence is by doing that, by recognizing our internal dialogue, as we've been discussing as well. And as leaders, I want to ask you, I don't know if we have time or if we want to take on questions. Geraldine, what is best at this stage?
We've a couple of kind of questions or conversations happening in the chat around I think there was a couple there around kind of anxiety, but it coming out in the form of micromanagement. So we'll be interested to know if there's tools and techniques around that. And Natalie, Kim, if you have noticed it in yourself or noticed it in others and how you've addressed that. And I think it kind of ties back to the conversation that you're just having right now around stress as well.
I think with micromanagement, so I was just reading these comments. So there's two different problems, I think, for lawyers, aren't there? One is not getting enough support and being thrown in the deep end, and like you go and do it and it's like a badge of honor or something. And then the other one is micromanaging, isn't it? So either of them are sort of not a good way to be dealt with. And it's difficult when that's where you work and that's how your manager operates. So it can be really difficult to deal with that. And a lot of the time, I think what people do is just close up. They just think about leaving, and they think, well, that's just the way it is. And then you get fear about moving jobs, and you think, if I go somewhere else, I'll just be the same. It's better the devil you know, and you just start to kind of have Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, where you think, I can't get out of this situation, and because your confidence is so low, that impacts on your decision to leave, because your confidence is destroyed, you then are fearful of going for another job, and so that can go on for years and years and years, and the longer it goes on, the worse it gets. So if you're in a situation, I think, where you're either being thrown in too deep or you're being micromanaged too heavily and your confidence is not great, if it cannot be resolved, it might be time to move on, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Just on that point, don't you think micromanagement from a leader is them showing their fear of failure, their insecurity? I think that comes back again to confidence. Confidence shouldn't just be about you as an individual. It's confidence in your team, confidence that you've given them the tools that they need, that you've spent the time training, that you've explained, that you've been readily available, you've had an open door policy, like holler if you need anything, you know, that confidence in your team shouldn't give rise to any micromanagement. Monitoring, yes. Supervision, yes. But I mean, I've had personal experience of somebody like that who was really threatened by my personality. There was nothing I could really do about it other than water myself down, which I'm not a fan of doing, and I don't feel I should have to do that. So we had a conversation about, look, what is it that I can help with? What is it that's the issue here? You know, that gave us some feedback, and it was just not something that she could deal with. And it was much more about other things going on in her life and not about her work life, but it tipped her over the edge at work because it's the only place she felt in control and valued.
That's funny, actually, Natalie, because I was just going to say most of the difficulties that we have are about control.
Yeah.
You know, so someone who's micromanaging is trying to control that situation for some reason, and we don't know what it is, and we probably will never know what it is. You start to feel a lack of confidence and anxious because you're not in control. So it's just this cycle, isn't it, of control issues. So I think a lot of time, if you can understand your own lack of control and what you can do about it and feel empowered, then that often will make you feel more confident, and it will help you overcome that situation that you're in. Likewise, if you can understand the reason why the other person is behaving that way, why they might feel like they have a lack of control, and you can have compassion and empathy for them, then that might allow you to break that cycle as well.
And it's not writing them off. It's, you know, it is a journey. It's a part of your development, personality management, working together. You know, that's one of our core values, and it's learning what makes each other tick, what are your triggers, and how you get the best out of that individual, which can only come through trial and error, really.
Exactly. I wanted to add to that what you were saying, having empathy, which is quite hard to do, you know, when it's been years of feeling in a certain position and stuff like that. But what I see with my clients, when they take distance between how the leader is behaving with them and why they're actually behaving with them, and trying to give them empathy, and at the same time taking ownership of their emotional response by telling them. And there's one example, actually, someone I coached yesterday who said that she's part of a big group of salespeople, and all the other salespeople are talking before her, and they're actually saying things that aren't right about her product, etc. So the way she's done it is actually she's gone to speak to her manager, who micromanages, to tell her how she's been feeling about that, and asked him to go first next time in the presentation. So the first reaction was a reaction of being hurt, so she didn't talk during the presentation. But the second reaction was, okay, what will I do with that? I know how this person is. I'm going to tell him how I feel, and she gave him the chance of the emotion, and he responded positively. So sometimes you got to be vulnerable for the other person to show empathy to you as well. So that's where also vulnerability comes in.
Thank you, Tanya. Now, Lincoln, we have 2 minutes left, but there is another conversation that I want to pull up from the chat as well. And this is from Zira, who, having had one failed startup, they now are thrown into another leadership role, but are struggling with courage and confidence. How can they overcome this? And there's been lots of advice in the chat already, but wondering if our leaders, and Tanya, if you have some tips. This is what our session was kind of all about, but I guess there's this extra element of, if you've kind of already had a setback, how do you get back up again?
Well done, Zara, for taking on a new challenge and for showing us your courage here. I don't know, ladies, I think it's something for you, as you've set up a business during the pandemic.
I would say, oh, sorry, go.
It's fine. So it's fine. Do continue. It's fine.
I would just say that one doesn't. it's amazing that you've tried again, and I think that's smashing. Like, you know, just because one has not worked out doesn't mean that the other will. So they're not the same thing. The circumstances are different. You know, so just keep going.
Sounds
and you've
really
learned as well that nothing bad happens as well. You've learned as well that if it doesn't work out, then you go and do something else.
I don't want to be flippant about your situation, Sarah, but somebody once said something to me, because I've had a similar situation in my past. The last one was the dress rehearsal, and this is your live show. So I really liked that.
It's really good.
This concept of taking events that are very important to us as a test of life is key into continuing and in progress, not this all or nothing mentality, not this perfectionist mentality that we sometimes confuse imposter syndrome with perfectionism, but they're not the same. And the fact that we either succeed or we fail, but no, that's not the case. So if you take that failure as an experiment and you tell yourself it's an experiment, even today, this presentation, this webinar is an experiment of life. If it goes well, great, we'll do others. It was useful, and you have to take it in this way, so you put less pressure on yourself. You prepare, practice and prepare is key to confidence. But then once you've done all of this, just, you know, develop your worth by saying, I'm going to be okay when I go to bed tonight, because it's not going to define me, even if I've said the wrong thing, or I've had a negative remark, etc. Thanks so much for sharing, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Tanya, for joining us for this special event. Lots of great feedback in our chat. I hope you've all taken a look. And would like to thank everybody for joining us. We are just going past 12, so I'm going to round out the session. We'll be back next month with our next episode 6 of our series. Really appreciate everyone for being so open, honest and vulnerable. And we'll be in touch soon. Have a safe and wonderful week wherever you are. Thank you, everybody.